Hey everybody, it is Tuesday, September 10th. You're listening to the Mo.news podcast. I'm Mo from our new headquarters here in Manhattan. Personal headquarters.
Moshe, I hope the move went well. I am Jill Wagner. This is still the place where we bring you just the facts, regardless of where we are recording from.
And where we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to, and try to read in on the news, Jill, as I am walking through a cavern of boxes trying to figure out where I put the microphone for this podcast. But I found it.
Yes. So that is why the podcast taping just kept getting pushed back tonight. Got it.
Well, we're trying to set up the room for the baby so she can sleep in the new place. And then we're like, oh, do we have the bed sheet? You know how it goes with a move. Anyway, Alex luckily labeled. She had like a first box to open box with all the key things. So that made it easier to find what we needed to. Anyway, thank you for your patience, Jill, as we record this late on Monday night.
Of course, Moshe. And now let's get to the headlines, starting with some tech news. Will updates to Apple's new iPhone be enough to get users to upgrade?
Apple is certainly hoping so.
Debate night in America. What to expect as Donald Trump and Kamala Harris meet face to face for the first time, literally and also figuratively in this debate.
Yeah, they've both spent some time in Washington, but they've never been this close to each other. It's going to be a remarkable debate for a variety of reasons.
Some good news at the gas pump. Experts say the average national price for a gallon of gas could fall below $3 by next month. NFL star Tyreek Hill speaking out about being handcuffed during a traffic stop. What we know about what happened.
Yeah, face down on the pavement just hours before the start of the NFL season.
To health news, why more research is suggesting that Parkinson's may actually start in the gut. And the Princess of Wales is cancer-free, her message to the UK and the world. And legendary actor James Earl Jones has passed away at the age of 93, a look back at his life and legacy.
And his famous lines, "This is CNN."
Of course, that is the one that you think of most.
Wait, you can also go with, "Luke, I am your father." Why did I give him an accent? Listen, no one can do James Earl Jones. That sounded more like
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
That did. You're right.
Our apologies, James Earl Jones, if you are smiling down at us from
disrespect your legacy, James. I'm sorry.
And Moshe is on this day in history.
We'll tell you about a famous candy that was, upon release, exclusively sold to the U.S. military. Can you guess it?
All right, Apple on Monday unveiled a host of new products, including the iPhone 16. It features a number of updates that the company hopes will convince customers, many of whom have been holding on to their older gadgets, to upgrade. Now, since the 2020 launch of the iPhone 12, which was the first Apple smartphone with 5G connectivity, the company has given customers few reasons to buy the latest generation. Phone cameras have largely advanced to the point where they are sufficient for most people's day-to-day needs without major hardware changes. And at some point, the human eye isn't even capable of perceiving higher screen resolutions.
Yeah, if you've needed to get a phone in recent years and you go to the Apple store and you're like, what's the difference between this one and this one? And they're like, this megapixel versus that. Like, for the most part, they've had trouble selling most customers on getting the newest version.
So about 300 million iPhones worldwide have not been upgraded in more than 4 years. Good for many of us, not so good for Apple. As a result, iPhone sales, which make up half of the company's revenue, have been sluggish. Similarly, the Apple Watch and AirPods have seen mostly incremental upgrades in recent years that have not persuaded customers to shell out hundreds of dollars for slightly better devices. Unless, of course, they're like me and lose their AirPods every few months.
Jill has single-handedly been keeping Apple afloat with her renewed reason to buy AirPods every couple of months.
Yes, you're welcome, Tim Cook. So on Monday, Apple made several announcements that it believes could promote a new major sales cycle. So when it comes to the iPhone 16, Apple announced that the phone will be the first model purpose-built for generative artificial intelligence. So what does that mean exactly? There is a new camera control feature accessed with a button on the side of the phone, and that would give users access to so-called visual intelligence. For example, after clicking the camera control, a user can point the camera, just say at a restaurant, and then the iPhone 16 will pull up information like reviews, the menu, how to make a reservation. And then it can also be used to identify things like dog breeds or landmarks and to add things to your calendar.
Even less of a reason to talk to anyone ever again.
It was Carlos Whitaker, right, who you just interviewed, who said we don't need to have all of the information always at our fingertips.
It's good to actually talk to other human beings, and yet technology continues to give us even fewer and fewer reasons to talk to others here. Still, pretty interesting technology here. Siri in this new iPhone 16 will be able to pull info from users' text messages, meaning it can remind you of a TV or music recommendation sent by a friend, or you could say something like, hey, send Jill the photos from the barbecue on Saturday or when we went apple picking over the weekend. And Siri will understand which photos to send from which day and automatically send them to the right person. Or at least we hope, because depending on the event and the person, it could get super awkward or weird.
Why did I just get pictures from the barbecue that I wasn't invited to?
Right. Or I sent them to the wrong Jill, or they misheard Jill. I meant to send them to Bill. Anyway, so there's going to be...
What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong here, folks? Especially when it's automatically sending photos from your phone. Anyway, so you'll have the new iPhone 16, the iPhone 16 Pro. There's a higher end iPhone 16 that'll let you shoot in 4K resolution at 120 frames per second with the ability to make the video slow motion after the clip. So if you're really into shooting video and that sort of thing, there are some cool features in this new phone. Apparently, you'll be able to pre-order it as soon as Friday, and it'll be in stores on September 20th. Given some of the promises here and the interest in AI, it'll be interesting if they can go back to the days. Remember, Jill, I think we've all in news over the last decade and a half covered the lines outside the Apple store. And the question will be, will there be enough demand here to create that idea of, people standing in line for this? Unclear whether that'll be the case here on September 20th. Also, you mentioned they have a new version of the AirPods. They call them the most comfortable set yet, Jill. So when you lose your next pair of AirPods, know that these are the most comfortable ones they've ever created. They've also gained a hearing aid feature that is awaiting regulatory approval for those who are hard of hearing here. And then you have Apple also getting to the health world when it comes to the Apple Watch. Their latest watch here, they say, can detect sleep apnea, which is the most common and potentially dangerous condition that can cause breathing to stop while people are sleeping. That feature is waiting for approval from the FDA, but is expected to be available in over 150 countries later this month.
And back to the phone quickly, Moshe. People are really excited about all of the new emojis. Apparently, you can create original, what they're calling Genmojis. You just type a simple description, or you can even select a photo of a friend or a family member. And Apple says basically iPhone users are going to be able to express themselves exactly how they want to using emoji.
Less words, less talking to people, more emoji. It's our future. Hey, Siri. Hey, Siri, can you accomplish all of my functions on the next day without me having to move?
But again, when you think about just the potential for this to go wrong, imagine you're like, give me an emoji of Jill, and it comes out and it's like, I don't know. No, we'll see.
Listen, we've been through all this. We know that the new one gets released and they learn from it. And then there's going to be update 0.1, 0.2, 16.3, 16.7. You always get that message from your phone saying, hey, when we go to sleep tonight, I'm going to be updating your phone. And then you wake up in the morning and either your phone will be updated or you get that weird message from the phone being like, I couldn't update your phone overnight. We'll have to do it again tomorrow night. You're like, okay, iPhone, do you.
All right, it is debate night in America. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump will be debating for the first time. In fact, they will be in the same room for the very first time, despite the fact that she was a senator for several years. When he was president, the two have never actually interacted.
We should say she did attend, when she was senator, his State of the Union addresses, but obviously that's a big room with lots of people. They've never had this sort of meeting before.
For Harris, this event offers the opportunity to make the case for her economic agenda, introduce herself to voters who still have a vague impression of her. As we mentioned yesterday, about a third of Americans still say that they need to learn more about her. She also has an opportunity to reassure Americans that she is ready to serve as commander-in-chief. She's been blunt when describing her expectations for her face-to-face with Trump. She said in a radio interview this about Trump recently, quote, "There is no floor for him in terms of how low he will go." And we should be prepared for that. We should be prepared for the fact that he is not burdened by telling the truth. And we should be prepared for the fact that he is probably going to speak a lot of untruths. In response to Harris's comments, a Trump spokesperson said in a statement that she will be, quote, "the only person lying on that debate stage," calling her a far-left, dangerous liberal. A top objective for Trump, aides say, is to keep the debate focused on high inflation during Biden's presidency and anxieties over the U.S.-Mexico border, pinning Harris to Biden and his policies. Trump also plans to dig into Harris's own record as a prosecutor in California, describing her as weak on violent crime and remind voters of her shifts from more liberal stances. She's tried to explain her various policy changes, including telling CNN recently that while her stances have changed, her, quote, values have not changed.
Yeah, a reminder, she's changed her views on banning plastic straws, on mandating automakers only make electric cars available by a certain year, banning fracking, decriminalizing crossing the border, reparations for slavery, building a wall on the border, a federal jobs guarantee that was part of the Green New Deal, a whole variety of issues. She ran very progressive in 2019 when she ran for president and has moderated when it comes to her views this time around. So we'll see to what extent the moderators tried to pin her on that tonight in that ABC debate. We'll see how Trump reacts on that. A reminder, I will be there in Philly tonight, so I'll bring you on-the-ground coverage as I head on a train there later today. It does come, so this face-off does come after what we've said is probably the most consequential debate in modern American history. Biden did so poorly, he left the race less than a month later. Trump actually says he regrets the knockout blow that he says he delivered to Joe Biden. One would argue we're not sure how much was Trump versus just Biden basically digging his own political grave there. That said, Trump does have the most general election debate experience in modern history here since he's run for president 3 straight times. So this will be his 7th debate over 3 general election presidential races. You double that if you include all those primary debates that he did back in 2016. A lot of experience here. When it comes to Kamala Harris, as we've mentioned, she had that VP debate with Mike Pence 4 years ago, and then a couple primary debates back in 2019 when she was running for the Democratic nomination. Some she did well, some she didn't do so well in. So there's a lot of pressure on her from Democrats, especially as they feel that they have lost momentum here, that she had the momentum coming out of July into August. But ultimately, look at the battleground polls, and it appears still slight advantage Trump here in a number of key states. Interestingly, she's trying a new tack on Trump versus her predecessors, Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, who went for he's a misogynist. Joe Biden went for he's bad for democracy. Her big message is he's stale, he's old, he's the same tired playbook, he's helping the rich, and she is the change agent here. One of the things the Harris campaign is also hoping for is to show America what it looks like that Trump is the older guy in the race now. She's 60, he's 78. Compared to Biden, he was a spring chicken, even though he was only 3 years younger. The energy level was much higher. But if you've been watching his recent rallies, he has confused some facts, stumbled over points in recent weeks. He tells some rambling stories. He doesn't necessarily answer the question here. To what extent will she pin that on him? And to what extent will that lead to questions about his cognitive health? And Americans feeling like, oh, maybe he's not up for 4 more years. Remember, if Trump gets elected here, he'll actually be 1 year older than Biden was when he started his current term. I mentioned the polls here. One pivotal number we'll be looking at tonight, and the voters that we'll be focused on. 18% of likely voters right now say they lean toward one of the candidates, but don't have a firm preference. Others say they don't lean towards either. So that's 1 out of 5 voters right now who are like, I'm changeable here. So uncommitted voters, what we know about them, they're slightly more male than female here. Women have their minds made up more than men right now. And in many cases, they're self-described moderates. unsure of what direction to go in. Some say they tend to like Trump's policies, don't like his personality. And that's why some Trump advisors are telling him, hey, stick to the issues. And, what did we say yesterday, Jill? One advisor said, be happy, Trump. Don't be mean, Trump.
We'll see if he could do it.
I think a lot of people in his own camp, a lot of us in the media who'll be watching in the media room tonight in Philadelphia, will be seeing what sort of Trump we get tonight, what sort of Harris we get tonight, and what is the moment that will make this debate memorable. As
you mentioned, I'm in particular going to be watching for his cognitive abilities, because as you discussed in that podcast with John Heilman and Peter Hamby from Puck, so much of our attention had been focused on Biden and Biden's age, and if he was really up for the job, that perhaps some of the things that Trump has said that maybe would have raised a red flag didn't necessarily raise the red flag. So I'm curious how he's going to do in that regard tonight. So I'm curious how he is going to do in that regard tonight.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. They'll get record ratings tonight, right? This is not a middle of June debate between two candidates that people are like, oh my God, I can't believe they're running against each other, right? This has gotten more interesting now, more competitive. We're in September. People are home. It's slightly cooler outdoors. So less reason to be outside past 9 p.m. So one of the questions I have is, does more time in front of the camera help Harris or help Trump, or hurt both of them? And ultimately, can they convert some people, or can the other person's terrible performance convert people? It'll be very interesting. Jill, one of the things I'll be very curious about tonight, they have the media room where we all watch the debate, and then we go into what's called the spin room. And that's where you have governors, senators, what they call surrogates for the various candidates will be out there. So we're waiting for the list right now of who will be there, but people who are allies. So you can expect like a Tim Scott or Doug Burgum out there in the spin room, or a Josh Shapiro or Gretchen Whitmer potentially there. And they come out there and they're like, let me tell you why my candidate won. Now, June was interesting because the Biden people were like, yeah, I can't even say that. Like, they're supposed to come out there and say, my guy did great tonight. They're like, yeah, he's been a great president, though. And that was their message. So we'll see what that message is. We will have coverage, as always, on the Instagram account. I'll be live tonight. But if you want the Q&A, the behind-the-scenes details, the spin room, that's what I'll have over on the premium Instagram account. And you can get a free trial right now, mo.news/free trial, to get access to that.
Time now for the speed read from CNN. Gas prices in the U.S. have fallen to a fresh 6-month low of $3.27 a gallon this week, down more than 50 cents from this point last year, according to AAA. Drivers in 10 U.S. states, including Texas, Kentucky, and Kansas, are paying less than $3 a gallon on average. Oil consultants expect that another 9 states are going to be joining that sub $3 list in the next 2 weeks. Data from Opus, which tracks gas prices at 130,000 stations across the country, shows that nearly 41,000 of those, or nearly 1 out of every 3, are already charging less than $3 a gallon for regular gas. A year ago at this time, there were barely 100 stations nationwide that were below the $3 mark. From 100 to 41,000 in a year. By around Thanksgiving, approximately 35 to 40 states could be below $3 a gallon, according to Gas Buddy. And Moshe, I posted this on my Instagram feed a couple of days ago, and people even in New York, even here on Long Island, have told me that they have seen as low as $2.89 a gallon. Here on Long Island.
Where is that? I was just filling up on the way back to the city, and I certainly did not see that price.
Moshe, I believe it was at a Costco somewhere on the South Shore.
Yes, Costco. Have seen a number of good prices there as I've passed by. Of course, as we get into election season, a lot of questions about the politics of all of this and the impact of gas prices on the election. Keep in mind, gas prices in most battleground states are much lower than they were a year ago. Sharp declines in Arizona, down 88 cents. Nevada, down 55 cents. Georgia, down 49 cents. So naturally, it led to questions on our Instagram account yesterday. Moshe, is Biden lowering this on purpose ahead of the election? And my response is, Biden wishes he had that much control over gas prices. A reminder here, presidents wish they could keep gas prices low all the time, because that is one way many Americans because that is one major factor Americans use to judge how they feel about the economy and the cost of things. A reminder here, oil prices and therefore gas prices, which come from crude oil, right, dictated by the global market, oil company production, natural disasters, chaos or wars around the world, then oil traders are reacting to that. Half of the world's oil supply controlled by OPEC countries like Saudi Arabia, Russia is part of what's called OPEC Plus, etc. Now, presidents do have energy policies. They can release barrels from the strategic reserve, as Biden has done in the past. That tends to impact prices, 10 to 20 cents or so when they do that. But ultimately here, when you look at the larger history, when you look at the longer history of U.S. oil production, it's been going nearly straight up since 2008, which was the modern low for how much oil we were producing here in the U.S. It dropped a bit during that initial oil shock, well, all of shock during COVID, when everyone was locked down and quarantined and gas prices dropped really low. By the way, that's the gas price that Trump likes to use when he talks about getting gas below $2.
You mean when a barrel of gas was actually $0, Moshe?
when oil traders were like, are people ever going to leave their homes again? This was like March
No,
and
like
April
literally.
2020. Yeah.
No, like literally they were paying people to take the oil off of their hands.
Right. It was a crazy time for a whole variety of reasons then. The point being, oil production has skyrocketed. Going back 16 years now, but especially since 2020, we've been breaking record after record after record for all-time oil production in world history here in the U.S. Now, keep in mind, we produce tons of oil. We also consume even more than that. So even though we're breaking records, we're still consuming more than that, which means, naturally, of course, for a variety of reasons, we do need to still import oil. That said, this does, net out, they say, positively for Kamala Harris. At the same time, Trump is responding, saying he will make gas prices go even lower. He says that he will bring gas prices below $2 a gallon without really explaining beyond his expression, he likes drill, baby, drill, how he's going to make that happen. A lot of oil analysts you talk to say you can't really talk about below $2 a gallon gasoline because the chances are that if we get below $2 again, something awful has happened in the economy, severe recession, people again not leaving the house, etc. And so nonetheless, good news for all of us. We're also coming off of that summer blend. The gas blend we use in the fall that's different from the summer is also cheaper to produce. But I'll tell you this, Jill, one place where gas will not go below $3, California. I got the Californians in my feed being like, what about us? It's like, well, you guys have the highest state taxes and fees on your gas. And keep in mind, that's why you see different gas prices in different states, because many of them charge different state taxes and fees. So some of you have already seen sub $3 gas. Some of you may see it in the coming months. California, fat chance.
But please keep listening to us.
No, we love you in California. I just want to give you a reality check. Don't get too excited here.
All right, switching gears, we're learning more about the police stop of a star NFL player that led him to being handcuffed just hours before the start of the NFL season. The Miami Dolphins star wide receiver Tyreek Hill believes that if he weren't a famous football player, officers may have shot or arrested him during a police confrontation that he says, quote, went from 0 to 60. The wide receiver was driving to the Dolphins Jacksonville Jaguars game on Sunday when Miami-Dade police stopped him just outside of Hard Rock Stadium, handcuffed him, and put him face down on the pavement. Hill insists he was cooperative with police, rolling down his window and giving his identification. He said he was in no rush because he was within the shadows of Hard Rock Stadium and had no reason to be anxious or in a hurry. The Miami-Dade Police Department has launched an internal affairs investigation, and at least one officer has been taken off the streets in the wake of the confrontation, which was captured on video that has been widely shared on social media.
Yeah, so apparently he was cited for reckless driving and driving without a license, according to his agent. But Hill tells NBC, if I was not Tyreek Hill, Lord knows I probably would have been like, worst case scenario, I would have been shot or I would have been locked up, put behind bars for a simple speeding ticket. By the way, we should note that he was driving a McLaren. He was driving a McLaren 720S, which goes for about $300,000 to $350,000. So there's a lot of video of this as people are driving to the game being like, oh my God, look at that car. Oh my God, that's Tyreek Hill of the Dolphins face down on the pavement. And so you had Tyreek now saying to NBC, the officer was on a power trip. He felt like he just needed to do something. I am glad I wasn't hurt. And again, if I was not Tyreek Hill, God knows what would have happened to me. Hill is insisting that he was cooperative, that there was no reason for the police to do this. Now, you do have the police union saying that Hill was not immediately being cooperative with police here. So that's the police unit, which represents the officers. The police department itself hasn't commented, besides saying they have an internal affairs investigation going on right now. And they aren't going to discuss the incident until they have more. We haven't gotten the release of the body cam video, if that was rolling at the time either. What was notable, Jill, is that a couple of his teammates were driving by and stopped when they saw him talking to the police there. The defensive lineman, Calais Campbell, drove by and then stopped and then tried to calm things down. He was handcuffed. Campbell was handcuffed, even though he was standing off to the side, saying he was trying to calm things down there. So still a lot of questions here about why this took place. And again, to Hill's point, what would have happened if he wasn't a star athlete? And as we were talking about before the pod, this is sort of a reminder of that incident with the golfer a couple months ago in Kentucky.
Yes, that was Scotty Scheffler in May. All right, some health news from the Washington Post. A new study adding to a growing body of evidence that Parkinson's disease, long believed to have its origins in the brain, may actually begin in the gut. In Parkinson's disease, the entire gastrointestinal tract is affected, causing complications like constipation, drooling, trouble swallowing, and delayed emptying of the stomach. And the symptoms often appear up to 2 decades before motor symptoms like tremors. The study's author says that people have, for the longest time, described Parkinson's disease as a top-down disease, so that it starts in the brain and then percolates down to the gut. Another hypothesis, though, suggests that it may be a bottom-up approach where it actually starts in the gut and then goes all the way up to the brain. Researchers found that people with upper gastrointestinal conditions, in particular ulcers and other types of damage to the lining of the esophagus, stomach, or upper part of the small intestine, were far more likely to develop Parkinson's disease later in life. People with a break or a sore in the mucous lining of the gastrointestinal tract was associated with a 76% greater risk of developing Parkinson's disease during a follow-up period about 15 years later.
So globally here, this is a big issue because the number of people with Parkinson's disease has doubled in the past 25 years. Some are calling this a Parkinson's pandemic. Parkinson's is the fastest growing neurological disorder in the world. It has even surpassed Alzheimer's. Now, much of that increase is attributed to just an aging population globally, but the rise in incidence persists even when you adjust for age-related factors here. So they are trying to get to the bottom of this, the why this is becoming so prevalent. Only about 10% of cases can be traced to genetics, according to experts, with the vast majority labeled as sporadic. Now, solving the mystery of why some people develop Parkinson's while others don't could lead to better early detection, treatment, hopefully one day prevention. The current findings suggest that damage to the lining of the gut could possibly be an inciting event that triggers the initial misfolding, as they say. So this is a story we'll continue to watch here as they try to get to the bottom of this surge in Parkinson's disease.
From The Guardian, the Princess of Wales has said she's doing what she can to stay cancer-free after completing her chemotherapy treatment, and she is now planning to return to limited public engagements in the coming months. Kensington Palace released a video message on Monday. It's about 3 minutes, narrated by Kate, with photos and videos of her and her kids and Prince William. She said it has been a very rough 9 months for her family.
Doing what I can to stay cancer-free is now my focus. Although I have finished chemotherapy, my path to healing and full recovery is long, and I must continue to take each day as it comes.
Catherine had begun working from home on some projects, and she will return to a light program of external engagements for the remainder of the year, according to the palace.
She says, quote, "The cancer journey is complex, scary, unpredictable for everyone, especially those closest to you. With humility, it also brings you face to face with your own vulnerabilities in a way you have never considered before. And with that, a new perspective on everything." She is the mother of 3 young children, so I can't imagine how challenging that was, in addition to dealing with her cancer diagnosis and chemo here. She revealed back in March that she'd been diagnosed with cancer after not being seen in public view for a while, leading to a lot of speculation about what was going on. It came as her news came shortly after her father-in-law, King Charles, the King of England, had disclosed that he was being treated for cancer. The king has since resumed public engagements. He took a 3-month break to focus on his treatment, recuperation, but he's been doing a whole bunch of events, traveling around the world. Again, the palace hasn't been very specific about the types of cancer either of them had here, but it's good to see that she is back and feeling good and feeling up to being out there in public again.
And finally, from Variety, James Earl Jones died this morning at his home in Dutchess County, New York. The revered actor voiced Star Wars villain Darth Vader, starred in Field of Dreams and many other films and Broadway shows, and is an EGOT winner. He was 93 years old, widely regarded as among the world's great stage and screen actors. Jones is one of the few entertainers to have won the EGOT, that is an Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony. He is probably best known, though, for his voice role as Darth Vader in George Lucas's original Star Wars trilogy, and reprised it for subsequent films, Unless You Are Moshe, and best know him for This is CNN. And that promo. Among his best-loved roles is Terrence Mann, the reclusive 1960s author who reluctantly teams with Kevin Costner's Ray Kinsella in Field of Dreams. That movie came out in 1989. He also voiced The Lion King's Mufasa in both the 1994 animated picture and the 2019 hybrid remake. And again, he lends his voice to the famous This is CNN promo campaign for the cable news network.
He actually debuted in Dr. Strangelove back in 1964. So an incredible career over multiple decades here. You mentioned he's an EGOT winner. Some of his most amazing work was on stage. That's apparently what he loved to do the most, Jill. He earned 4 competitive Tony Award nominations for Best Actor in a Play, winning twice for his performances in The Great White Hope back in 1969, as well as August Wilson's Fences back in 1987. He also won a special Tony Award several years ago. Now, what's interesting about Jones, he had this authoritative voice, large man, 6'2", but as a child, extremely timid. He was raised on a farm in Mississippi and then in Michigan, and he spent 8 years virtually mute, not talking to anybody as a kid to hide a stutter. And so from effectively kindergarten through high school, early high school, he was embarrassed to speak because of the stutter. He says he would communicate with his family, but he was embarrassed to talk to people in public. He said he would communicate with animals, calling the hogs, the cows, the chickens on the farm, because they don't care how you sound. They just want to hear your voice. But then, and this is why we love teachers, and you should always thank your teachers, he goes to high school. And a teacher, in an effort to draw him out, has him start to recite poetry. And he's shocked at the sudden confidence he has. This is James Earl Jones at 14 years old, that he has confidence in his voice. He's like, oh, maybe I am okay to speak. Maybe I can speak clearly here. Maybe I can overcome my stutter. And so ultimately here, he gives a lot of credit to that high school teacher who helped him get some confidence there in his voice. And we all have to thank that teacher for giving us the gift of James Earl Jones all these decades.
Moshe, that I did not know. And I hate following up something so lovely, but I was just going to say, I also loved him in Coming to America as King Jafar. He was great.
Listen, James Earl Jones, like some very memorable roles through the years. And so it's definitely sad to see the headline cross yesterday, but a life well lived by James Earl Jones. All right, as we look back here, we now turn to On This Day in History. We begin in 1897. A 25-year-old London taxi driver named George Smith becomes the first person ever arrested for drunk driving. Cars were new at the time, and he would plead guilty for that offense. The U.S. would have its first laws against operating a motor vehicle under the influence of alcohol in New York. Actually, New York State went first back in 1910. All right, now to the answer. To the clue earlier in the podcast, these candies were first introduced on this day in 1941 and exclusively sold to the military. The M&M. The issue for the military and for soldiers is they were looking for something to give soldiers energy on the battlefield. At the time, chocolate was viewed as an energy source. And so the issue for soldiers, though, is that you couldn't put the chocolate in your pocket because it would melt on the battlefield. So what they did with the M&M, of course, is they had this shell, right, that was more heat resistant, easy to transport in your pocket, wouldn't melt immediately. So ultimately here they saw a lot of success, and all the GIs who would return home from World War II said, I love these M&M things, and M&M started to blow up as a consumer chocolate for everybody. And finally on this day, we now head to the 1970s, Jill, and this date surprised me. On this day in 1977, the last person in France was guillotined. And I was like, wait, they were guillotining people to the 1970s? Yes, a murder convict in Marseille was the last person to be executed via guillotine in 1977. Of course, the expression off with their head, literally, the guillotine named after, well, Joseph Guillotine. He invented it. He won passage of a law requiring all death sentences to be carried out by means of a machine back in the 1700s. And they view this as a more humane way of taking out a prisoner versus hanging or firing squad. And so ultimately here, Joseph Guillotine invents the guillotine, and they use the thing. They used it till the late 70s.
It makes you feel so old. You know how sometimes they're like, have you ever seen those memes where they're like, the difference between 2024 and 2004 is the same as like 1980 and 1960?
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, like 1960 felt like the oldies.
Right.
You know?
Well, like for example, remember like growing up in like the 90s, if you watch the Wonder Years and you're watching a show about like the late 60s and you're like, oh my God, that's so long ago. And that's like 25 years ago. That's like watching a show today about the year 2000.
It's great.
All right. Anyway, we move on here to the 1980s. On this day, Alex Trebek debuted as the host of the TV game show Jeopardy, a role that he would have for more than 3 decades. And now we head to music history on this day. The Weather Girls debut It's Raining Men on this day in 1982. Slightly different type of music on this day in 1991.
So I just looked up some of their other songs to see if they were also kind of like weather related.
The Weather Girls.
Yes. And no, like there's no like snowy day or anything like that.
So they basically, they were the Weather Girls. They did It's Raining Men. And then they're just like, that's going to be our song, our iconic song that makes sense because of the name of the group.
It looks that way.
Got it. In a very different type of music, on this day in 1991, Nirvana releases its breakout single, Smells Like Teen Spirit, would become one of the most iconic bands, rock bands on earth. Of course, just a couple years later there, we would lose Kurt Cobain, way too young. And a bit of TV history on this day, 31 years ago, The X-Files with David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson premieres on Fox.
All right, guys, that is a wrap. Thank you for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
Jill, eat your M&Ms. We need you up late tonight for post-game analysis of the debate. I'll be awake in Philly in the spin room. You can follow my coverage over on the Instagram account, the Mo News Instagram account. Join Premium for all the good stuff. And then Jill, I will return from the spin room with all the headlines and interviews to recap the debate with you later tonight, depending on whether you've passed out or not post-debate.
No, I've got M&Ms, coffee. I'm good.
like a GI in World War II. Let me get me some M&Ms.
Fill her up. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you tomorrow.